Imagine for a second, right, that you are just standing outside.
Okay.
You look down at your phone, and the official weather app tells you there is a 0% chance of rain.
Right.
Like, it is bright, it's sunny, the official National Meteorological Department has spoken.
But then you look up.
Exactly. You look up from your screen, and you are getting absolutely drenched in a torrential downpour.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
So how do you decide what's true? Do you trust the official report generated by some distant supercomputer? Or do you trust the water soaking through your shoes?
I mean, that is basically the defining epistemic crisis of our time, right?
Yeah.
We're just constantly caught in this fracture between top-down institutional narratives and, well, ground-up lived reality.
And that tension, that exact breaking point between what authorities claim on paper and what a guy with a camera claims he's seeing with his own two eyes, that's the entire focus of today's deep dive.
It is a wild case study.
It really is. We are digging into a highly debated, on-the-ground report from a YouTube channel called POW News.
Yeah, Dutch channel.
Right, and they sent a correspondent named Tom, who goes by the Dutch travel maniac, to the Spanish enclave of Ceuta to investigate this sudden, massive surge in migration.
And, Ceuta itself is just this fascinating geopolitical anomaly.
Yeah.
It sets the stage for this perfectly.
Right, because it's technically Spain, but...
Exactly. It's a Spanish city, but it sits geographically on the north coast of Africa. It shares a fenced border with Morocco.
So it's basically a doorway.
Yeah, it represents a physical, land-based gateway directly from the African continent into the European Union.
Now, before we get into the weeds of this report, we need to lay down a critical ground rule for you listening.
Definitely.
European migration is a fiercely politicized topic. It carries immense ideological weight across the entire political spectrum.
Oh, absolutely.
So we want to be unequivocally clear here. We are not taking a political side today.
No, not at all.
We're not here to endorse the mainstream media's handling of this crisis, and we aren't endorsing this independent reporter's conclusions either.
Right. Our goal is strictly analytical. We are just here to deconstruct the claims, the economic realities, and, the systemic arguments presented in this specific source material.
Yeah, we just want to see what mechanically happens when rogue citizen journalism clashes with an official state narrative.
I mean, we're dissecting the architecture of the arguments, really. Because by looking at how these two very different information ecosystems process the exact same physical event.
You can understand the broader mechanics of modern media.
Exactly. Modern media and border policy.
Okay, let's unpack this. The catalyst for this entire report was a specific narrative being broadcast back in the Netherlands.
Right, by the NOS.
Yep, the Dutch national broadcaster. They ran a story asserting that a recent massive influx of migrants into Ceuta had been fully managed.
Right, they literally used the phrase that the genie was back in the bottle.
Yeah. Citing official figures from Spanish authorities, the NOS reported that only about 1,300 undocumented migrants remained in the city.
Just 1,300.
Right. And to a viewer in Amsterdam, it sounded like a bureaucratic success story. Crisis averted, order restored.
What's fascinating here is how that official number is generated in the first place,
Right.
When the Spanish government says 1,300, they're likely referring to a very specific, rigid metric. Steep bureaucracies, they count what they can process.
So like paperwork.
Exactly. They're counting the individuals who have been formally detained, fingerprinted, placed in a holding facility, or, entered into a digital database.
Wow.
If you haven't interacted with that bureaucratic machinery, you just simply do not exist in the official data set. The state counts paperwork, not physical bodies.
Which brings us to Tom's approach. He sees this neat, sanitized report on the Dutch news, and he just doesn't buy it.
Not for a second.
He essentially decides to bypass the corporate PR press release and go read the raw, unfiltered customer reviews, so to speak.
Right, he goes straight to the source.
He travels to Ceuta, which, by the way, is a relatively small, constrained city of roughly 80,000 residents.
Not very big.
No. And his report claims he found the polar opposite of a controlled situation. According to Tom, there are migrants setting up makeshift camps or bivouacking literally everywhere.
Yeah, he films them on the beaches, resting in the parks, hiding out in the hillsides.
Exactly. And based on his visual assessment and his conversations with really frustrated local residents, Tom concludes that the real number of migrants left wandering the city isn't anywhere near 1,300.
He puts the estimate at a minimum of 10,000.
Which is wild.
The sheer scale of that discrepancy is staggering. I mean, we're not talking about a rounding error or a slight statistical deviation here.
No, 10,000's a lot.
In a geographically bounded city of 80,000 people, an extra 10,000 unhoused individuals represents more than a 10% sudden population increase.
Right, just living entirely in the public square.
Exactly. The physical infrastructure, like sanitation, public space, local policing, it would all be visibly buckling under that weight.
And Tom was so incensed by this visual reality that he called the mainstream NS report, using this fantastic Dutch idiom, a monkey sandwich story.
A Brugia, an urban legend.
Yeah, a complete tall tale. He accuses the Spanish government of feeding massaged, deliberately deflated numbers to the press to save face.
Right.
And he really goes after the Dutch media for journalistic malpractice. He blasts them for blindly syndicating those numbers without sending a single correspondent to verify the facts on the ground.
Right. He explicitly tells his audience that Dutch citizens are being completely lied to.
But I mean, I have to push back on Tom's 10,000 figure here for a second.
Go for it.
We know from basic crowd science that human beings are notoriously terrible at visually estimating numbers.
Oh, absolutely terrible.
Right. If you see 300 people camped on a single beach, it feels overwhelming. It feels like an invasion. So isn't it highly likely that this rogue YouTuber is just as guilty of inflating the numbers for algorithmic engagement as the government might be of deflating them for political PR?
I mean, that is a crucial counterweight. The cognitive bias of a local resident or a visiting YouTuber is heavily skewed by proximity and friction.
Yeah, exactly.
If every street corner you walk past has a group of 30 tired, hungry people, your brain just naturally extrapolates that localized density across the entire city.
Which inflates the total in your head.
Right, which naturally inflates the aggregate number. Tom's methodology is entirely anecdotal. He doesn't have a satellite view or a systematic counting mechanism. He just has a camera and a microphone.
So we have a state apparatus mathematically undercounting by only registering the processed, and a YouTuber likely overcounting by relying on visual shock value.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it.
But the friction between those two numbers exposes a massive vulnerability in how international news functions today.
Definitely.
Because the Dutch broadcaster didn't fly a reporter to Ceuta, mainly because foreign desks have been gutted by budget cuts over the last 2 decades.
Right, they don't have the resources.
So they're forced to rely on wire services, which in turn rely on official government press releases. The institutional trust is broken because the public instinctively knows the institutional process itself is hollowed out.
It creates a massive vacuum. When official channels prioritize bureaucratic neatness over the messy, visible reality on the streets, they forfeit their monopoly on the truth.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. And in the digital age, citizen journalists with GoPros will happily step right into that void. The danger, of course, is that the public trades one flawed methodology state emission for another, which is populist exaggeration.
That sets the stage perfectly for the actual human element of this crisis. Because whether the number is a heavily massaged 1,300 or a visually inflated 10,000, we are still talking about thousands of unauthorized people suddenly gathered in a tiny enclave.
A lot of people in a very small space.
Right. And Tom spends a significant portion of his report trying to figure out who these men actually are.
And the demographics reveal a fascinating legal and logistical web.
Yeah, he notes the crowd is a mix of individuals from Morocco and various West African nations.
Which is a very important distinction.
Exactly. He highlights this crucial bureaucratic hurdle. While Spain might have certain repatriation agreements with Morocco to send citizens back across the border, they cannot easily deport someone from West Africa.
Right, because repatriation is a deeply complex international legal process. To deport someone, the receiving country has to formally acknowledge that the person is their citizen, and then they have to agree to take them back.
Right.
So if a migrant from West Africa discards their passport, or if their home country just flat out refuses to cooperate with European authorities, Spain is legally and logistically paralyzed.
They're stuck.
Yeah, they can't just drop them back in Morocco because Morocco will refuse to accept third country nationals. That leaves the migrant in a state of permanent legal limbo inside European territory.
Which makes the economic drivers of this migration even more potent because the potential reward drastically outweighs the risk of deportation.
Oh, please.
And one of the most surprising elements of Tom's report is his tone toward the migrants themselves. You might expect a piece of media heavily critiquing border failure to universally demonize the people crossing.
Yeah, that's usually the trope.
Right. And to be fair, he does include this highly hostile clip where a young man aggressively screams, fuck Europa, into the camera.
Which is a soundbite specifically designed to validate the narrative of a hostile invading force. It plays very well on anti-establishment channels.
Exactly. But then Tom immediately undercuts that expectation. He pivots back to the camera and states that 99% of his interactions with these men were highly respectful.
Yeah, he actually humanizes them.
He really does. He introduces guys named Ismail and Muhammad. And then he drops this piece of economic analysis that strips all the moralizing out of the debate.
Right.
He points out that an average laborer might make 300 euros a month in Morocco. But just a few miles away, inside the European Union, they hear they can make 6 or 7 times that amount.
It's a huge difference.
And Tom looks at the camera and admits, I can't blame them. If I were in their shoes, I would do the exact same thing.
Honestly, stripping away the geopolitics to reveal the raw economic gravity at play is perhaps the most intellectually honest moment in the source material.
I agree.
Because capital naturally seeks cheap labor, and labor naturally flows toward capital. When you have a geographical border where the GDP per capita multiplies by a factor of 10 across a single fence, the osmotic pressure on that fence is virtually insurmountable.
Right, it's just human nature.
It ceases to be a moral failing of the migrant and becomes a simple equation of human survival and economic ambition.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
What?
Because that economic pressure, that's a constant. The 300 euro reality has existed for years.
Right.
So what sparked this specific sudden mass crossing on this specific week?
The catalyst.
Exactly. According to Tom's conversations on the ground, the catalyst was entirely digital. Social media, specifically the platform X, was suddenly flooded with viral posts telling migrants that the border was unguarded.
It's completely open.
Yeah. The message was simple. If you swim across the breakwater right now, you can freely enter Europe. And Tom gets into some heavy geopolitical theorizing here.
Yeah, he notes some rumors swirling around.
Right. He asks if this was a deliberate state-sponsored psychological operation. Like, was it Russia trying to destabilize European politics? Was it Morocco trying to exert diplomatic leverage over Spain?
And the migrants themselves repeatedly told Tom that Spain literally opened a door.
Yeah, but I have to push back on this idea of a grand, coordinated conspiracy. I mean, do we really need a state intelligence agency to explain this?
Not necessarily, no.
Knowing how social media algorithms fundamentally prioritize viral engagement, isn't it entirely possible that this was just a localized, organic breakdown in border security that got amplified by a completely blind, engagement-hungry algorithm?
This raises an important question, and it is arguably the defining security puzzle of the 21st century. The concept we're dissecting here is weaponized migration, or, well, at the very least, algorithmically mobilized migration.
Right.
Because in the 20th century, moving 10,000 people across a sovereign border required a military general, an established supply chain, months of planning.
It was a massive physical operation.
Exactly. Today, the mechanics have fundamentally shifted. A single, well-timed rumor on X, whether it is seeded by a malicious state actor in Moscow or spontaneously generated by a teenager in Casablanca, can physically mobilize thousands of people in a matter of hours.
Because the algorithm doesn't care if the open door is a deliberate policy shift or just a rumor. It only cares that the rumor generates clicks.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And once the digital rumor hits a critical mass, it forces physical reality to conform to it.
Wow.
If 10,000 desperate people genuinely believe the border is open, they will converge on that border with such speed and density that the sheer physics of the crowd overwhelms the local border guards.
Right. The guards just have to step back.
Yeah, they are forced to step back just to prevent a mass casualty event. In that moment, the digital rumor becomes a physical truth. The door is forced open.
That's incredible.
This makes traditional static border control almost obsolete. I mean, how do you patrol a physical fence when the breach is being orchestrated by push notifications?
That is a terrifying operational reality. Push notifications functioning as digital wire cutters.
Exactly.
It bypasses the physical infrastructure entirely by just overwhelming the human operators. And that specific localized failure, that single breached door in Ceuta, that's what leads to Tom's broader systemic critique of the entire European political apparatus.
Because the architecture of the European Union means a local border failure in Spain is never actually contained to Spain.
So what does this all mean for the rest of the continent? Tom aims his frustration directly at the European Migration Pact.
Right, the big one.
Yeah, this is the massive overarching legislative agreement designed to manage asylum influxes and, distribute the burden across all EU member states.
And Tom is not a fan.
No, his commentary on the pact is dripping with sarcasm. He argues that politicians in Brussels can draft all the unified pacts they want, but if a single country fails to secure its local jurisdiction, the entire continental system unravels.
Right. He calls the attempt to manage migration internally while the external border is porous, mopping with the tap open.
It's a great visual. It makes me think of building a state-of-the-art bank vault,
Oh,
right? You spend billions of euros on reinforced titanium walls, biometric scanners, time locks on the front entrance, but you leave the back screen door completely off the hinges.
yeah, totally useless.
The security of the entire vault is entirely dependent on its weakest, most exposed point.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are describing the fundamental paradox of the Schengen area.
Right.
The Schengen Agreement, which abolished internal border checks and allows passport-free travel across most of the EU, is arguably the greatest achievement of modern European integration.
It's huge for the economy.
It is. It allows capital, goods, and citizens to flow seamlessly. But its structural Achilles heel is exactly what Tom is highlighting.
Right.
The internal freedom of movement is mathematically reliant on the absolute integrity of the external border. If an individual crosses into Ceuta and eventually makes it to the Spanish mainland, there is virtually no physical mechanism stopping them from taking a train all the way to Amsterdam.
Meaning an administrative or security failure on a beach in North Africa directly translates into a housing and social services crisis in a Dutch municipality.
Exactly.
The local governments in Northern Europe are forced to process a backlog generated thousands of miles away.
And that interconnected fragility is the exact pressure point that fuels populist and anti-establishment movements across the continent.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when local mayors in the Netherlands complain they have no beds left for asylum seekers, and the national government just points to a European pact that clearly isn't functioning as intended on the ground, public trust vaporizes.
It just completely disappears.
Yeah. This creates an incredibly fertile media environment for channels like POW News. They aren't just reporting alternative facts. They are leveraging the visible failure of the system to position themselves as the only honest brokers left.
Which brings us perfectly to the meta commentary at the very end of the source material.
Right.
Because POW News doesn't just end the video with Tom on the beach. They conclude with a deliberate framing of their own journalistic mission.
They lay it all out.
They really do. They describe themselves as fighting for critical, brutal, and confronting journalism. And they explicitly position themselves in opposition to what they call the Hague Gentlemen.
The entrenched Dutch political and bureaucratic elite.
Exactly. They claim this establishment actively wants to destroy their channel because POW News is daring to broadcast the unvarnished truth. It's a brilliant piece of narrative engineering.
It really is.
They elevate themselves from, just a YouTube channel covering a border crisis to the vanguard of a political resistance.
And it is highly effective because it feeds directly on the cognitive dissonance we discussed at the start of our deep dive.
Oh, the weather app analogy.
Right. When the official state television tells a citizen that a crisis is under control and only 1,300 people remain, but their social media feeds are flooded with unedited video of thousands of people overwhelming a city's infrastructure, the citizen feels gaslit.
Naturally.
So the anti-establishment channel steps in and says, "You aren't crazy. Your eyes aren't deceiving you." The elite in the capital are either hopelessly out of touch with reality, or they are intentionally deceiving you to protect their failed policies.
It validates the audience's alienation entirely.
Exactly.
Man, it has been a wild, complex journey through just a single source of on-the-ground reporting. We started with a dispute over a seemingly simple metric. Was it 1,300 processed migrants, as the bureaucratic channels claimed, or the 10,000 undocumented people Tom estimated based on the visual chaos? And from there, we unpacked the undeniable €300 a month economic gravity pulling young men toward Europe and the logistical nightmare of those repatriation agreements.
We also explored the mechanics of modern mass mobilization, looking at how the algorithmic virality of X can transform a digital rumor into a physical border breach.
Right.
Effectively utilizing social media as a geopolitical weapon.
And we finally traced how that localized breach in Ceuta sends shockwaves through the structural vulnerabilities of the European Migration Pact, empowering anti-establishment media to challenge the legitimacy of traditional institutions.
It's all connected.
It is a masterclass in why you, as an informed listener, must actively seek out and interrogate multiple perspectives.
You really have to.
You cannot afford to passively consume the neat, sanitized corporate press releases, but you also have to apply rigorous skepticism to the visually shocking anecdotal claims of rogue reporters.
Because neither the algorithmically driven YouTuber nor the politically insulated bureaucrat holds the complete narrative.
Exactly. You have to synthesize the bureaucratic data from the Capitol with the gritty reality from the beach just to piece together a functional picture of the truth. Genuine understanding requires navigating the friction between their competing realities.
Well said.
And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to explore on your own today. We spent a lot of time analyzing how a viral post on an app like X can physically mobilize thousands of people, moving them across international borders before a government can even draft a response.
Yeah.
So, if the nature of border security has shifted from physical fences to digital influence, how will the international treaties of the future need to adapt?
That's the million-dollar question.
How do you write a European Migration Pact that guards against not just physical incursions, but decentralized digital mobilization campaigns? Because if a government cannot control the algorithm, it is becoming increasingly clear that they cannot control the border. The terrain hasn't just shifted, it has been entirely rewritten.
It is a totally new paradigm.
It is. It's exactly like standing in the pouring rain, looking at a weather app that insists it's sunny, and suddenly realizing the app itself might have been designed to make you leave your umbrella at home. The water is real, regardless of what the screen tells you.